Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us, Ismail.
There you go. Thanks for being with us, Sam. I like your guitars. I like the guitars in the background. I really like
Yeah, there's a
it.
few more in the closet over there too. So it's a labor of
There
love.
you go. So let's do this. If we don't have enough questions, we can ask you to play the guitar for us.
Well, I'll make sure to leave my presentation with 0 time on the clock, so that you don't have to endure that for
Zero
anybody.
trust, zero trust,
Yeah,
zero time. There you go. All right. Well,
yeah.
Samuel, thanks for joining us. And you're going to talk to us about zero trust should extend to security vendors too, right? I love that question. I think it's very thought-provoking, and we're looking forward to know the answer to that question. All yours.
All right, Ishmael, thank you very much. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Really grateful to be here on this SANS webinar. It's truly a privilege. You guys are all the ones that are on the front lines, executing cybersecurity strategies across your different organizations and companies. So grateful for you taking a few minutes to learn alongside of us and hopefully ask some good questions and take some things that are actually practical. Quickly on this slide, I have a QR code, takes you to my LinkedIn. We're also dropping that in the Zoom, or sorry, excuse me, the Slack chat as well. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Look forward to engaging with you there. Our question is this: it's that zero trust. We understand it's a framework, it's an idea, perhaps maybe even an idealistic goal. And we've talked a lot about it. Y'all are experts in what zero trust is. And my question is, we should probably extend that to our security vendors and partners, right? We know the number of security incidents that are coming from third parties. Anytime one of your ecosystem partners or third-party partners has an incident, you hope your due diligence was done well enough. You hope you covered the bases and you have some security there. And that's great for third parties, contractors, managed services, those that are outside your organization that are providing a service for you and your teams. And we want to make sure we secure that. That's absolutely critical. But what about the tools that we're also using to provide that security? It's a question we'd love to discuss with you today. So if that's all right with you guys, we'll go ahead and get started. And clicking the button to extend slides. Look, it works. It's a good day. At Cyolo Security, we work hard to help safely connect people to their work. Every single person to everything that they need from no matter where they are in the world. And at Cyolo, we extend kind of an identity layer, if you will, into certain applications. And so now we have a way to safely connect to those services with a valid user every single time without violating the zero trust model. Our founder, we're about 2.5 years old as a company. We're based in Tel Aviv, Israel. We're one of the classic Israeli cybersecurity companies. Our founder was the first CISO of the Israeli Navy. And he would look around and ask all of the vendors that he met with and say, hey, can you impact my network? Can you make a change to my network without my knowledge? Whether you add yourself as a user, whether you make some type of configuration change, or whatever that is. Can you do that without my knowledge? And every single one would say, oh yeah, we would never do that. We never would. And of course they wouldn't. They would never purposely, or I don't think there's a security vendor out there that would maliciously cause any harm or damage to one of their clients. But the answer still came back as, technically, yeah, we probably could. We could do that theoretically. Of course, we never would, which is a violation of the zero trust model. Right? If there's, we are now extending a level of implicit trust to our security vendors. So if you take nothing else away from our time today, just ask the question within your teams and strategies and products, are we extending any form of implicit trust even to our security vendors? And if that's so, then let's either figure out, it's just another risk we have to mitigate or find a way around. We look at it and say, everybody's work today, it's different. And we have to use different modes to connect them to their work. And we have to evaluate this. I love what the last presentation was talking about, how, being able to evaluate what it is that we're connecting to and making sure we have the right level of access and privilege for those things. But this picture works from left to right on the picture. We have all the different users and types of users. These might be accurate for your organization. You might have other types of users in your world, but typically they're coming through on either a managed or not a managed device. And then they start hitting all of these tools that are in the middle here that are helping us to enforce security policy against the different resources, services, and items that are over on the right side of the slide, whether it's in a cloud, whether it's something on premises, whether it's an isolated air-gapped critical environment like in a manufacturing facility or a water treatment plant or some type of utility, and whether, or in a public cloud or whatever it is. We have all these different things, and we have this myriad of ways to connect and validate their security. It's highly complex, and it's not easy for users. We all know that one of the biggest threats to security is actually the user experience and how they access the work that they're trying to get to. And these tools they're ubiquitous. We all have something in our environment that's providing these services. You could probably think of who your PAM vendor is. You could think of your VPN. You could think of who you're using for CASB or other of these different tools that are out there. In this world where connecting people to work is highly complex, it's also very risky. And some of just the stats that are out there around third-party access. Most organizations have over 100 third-party vendors who are connecting into their world to provide critical services or work for them. And those organizations, 96% actually allow those third parties to get to very critical assets and systems. The stuff that if it breaks or is compromised, the board is immediately calling your leaders and saying, what's going on? We got to really look at that. Privileged access, who is allowed to get where. 49% of organizations have users with more access privileges than required to do their job. And a little over a third of breaches in the last couple of years have involved the compromise of privileged user accounts. Now, these could be, executives in your organization that have a high level of privilege to access a wide variety of information and resources, or down to, someone maybe more on the operational level or lower levels who have a privileged access to a certain account, but they also have more access than they need. This exploded. We saw this absolutely change dramatically when the work from home movement had the massive accelerant that was the recent pandemic. And everybody started working from home, and organizations had to say, well, how do we now enable our people to work? Well, we have to find, they need to get to what they need to for their work. So let's just open the floodgates. So now we're starting to see customers start to look at it and say, well, what did we do here? How did we go about this? And should we start restricting access again? And so if we have users that have more privileges than they need to do their job, something definitely to evaluate. Scarily, half of organizations do not have a remote work security policy. As we all know, it should be different. Your work in office or on-site security policy, it's going to necessarily should be different than your work from home or work on the road security policy. And even more terrifying, a third of organizations do not authenticate remote workers. For compliance, 57% struggle to deliver compliance reporting with their current methods, and it takes around 90 days to produce the reporting and evidence needed to meet their regulatory audits or cybersecurity due diligence or any of the data that's needed in the security stack to be delivered for compliance and reporting purposes. And with this, we have the whole list of vendors in the middle. There's a ton of them. I mean, I just kind of picked out top ones in different areas, looking at what Gartner reviews, looking at Magic Quadrants or G2 reviews, stuff that's out there and people are using. So we have all these users. They're all coming in on different machines or devices from different locations now, whether they're again on-site or remote, and they're all hitting something on this screen to help provide, or multiple things kind of in chain or in process to help them get access to what it is that they need to do their job. And the world is definitely scary. We say at Cyolo, one of our founders is an ethical hacker. He says, bad guys don't break in, they log in. And if that's not terrifying enough, he's the kind of guy, actually, like if you ever get a chance to meet Daddy, put your phone in a Faraday cage before you meet with him. That's just kind of my best practice. So fun to work with, incredibly smart, but this is a terrifying reality that it's no longer the brute force breaking in. It's they will have good credentials. And so having good credentials enables them to get in where they need to get to. So zero trust, in my opinion, if I were to give it a summary in a very simple way, zero trust says we need to validate every single user for every single connection every time. And so it's not oh, this user connected once, therefore we can trust them and they can connect again. It's we have to validate it every single time. The second part would be we want to limit and really restrict to their access, what they can connect to or work with, to only those specific things that they need to do their job. And the final piece would be let's monitor everything. Let's record all of the details. And so that's what Cyolo built our platform to do, to help make sure validated access for every single connection every time to only the items, resources, and systems that they need to do their job. And we keep a full record so you can report back on what's happened or quickly see what was changed or what went wrong to revert back to a previously good state and have good resilience in that way. Oh, obligatory vendor, scary slide, all the stuff that's happening out there in the world. I pulled a lot of these off of vendors, things that are happening in the industry within the different tools that we're using across the security stack. And so my argument for us today is that zero trust should extend to our vendors. It should extend to our vendors. And our view is that zero trust means zero exceptions. So what am I talking about? What are some examples of this? I hope to make this fairly practical. We have a team that's in the Slack channel currently right now. If there are questions that are coming in, please drop them in. If you think I'm just full of hot water and I don't know what I'm talking about, please let us know. We'd welcome the conversation. If you have honest questions or things that need explanation, we have a team looking forward to engaging with you there as well. Zero trust means zero exceptions. And I would argue, and I hope we can consider today, that we should not make exceptions for our security vendors. Now, I want to caveat this next part here. I'm a big fan of zero trust network access. I'm a fan of it. I think that it has made dramatic strides in improving the layers of security for different organizations and resources. And none of this is trying to say, I'm not trying to throw rocks or stones or whatever we want to say about that. But I think we should ask some questions. And I pulled this diagram just off Palo Alto's website. I got the credit right there on the bottom if you want to check it. So this is their image. But I think it makes sense. So zero trust network access basically says user is going to come through the ZTNA cloud of some kind. ZTNA is going to then determine where it can go, or if it's entitled to get there. It's going to use a whole bunch of different characteristics and policy checks and identity checks. As you can see here, it makes a lot of great decisions, and then it determines whether it can or cannot get to the certain application resource or thing or location, no matter where it is. So the way that it typically does that and is, obviously here users come in, ZTNA cloud, and then it gets to where they need to go. The problem I would have, though, is that it does decrypt and then re-encrypt the traffic in the cloud. And there's some benefits to that. I'm not going to say there are no benefits to that, but it's an inherent risk. Now, your encryption keys are living inside the ZTNA cloud or within your ZTNA provider because they have to decrypt the traffic. That's how they open it up. They'll do some packet inspection. They'll look at it. And they do that for a lot of good reasons, again, to help make sure there's no DLP, data loss prevention stuff, make sure there's nothing, infected perhaps. But you're giving your encryption keys that belong to you, that should be secret to your organization, to your security vendor. And this is something that I would say, this is now extending a level of implicit trust to the security vendor. So again, once it opens up the package, the encryption, it looks at everything, makes its decisions around the identity device, the application itself, where it's trying to get to, across a lot of different other characteristics. And then it will re-encrypt the traffic and before it sends it on its way. Our founder basically looked at it and said, that's not zero trust. It's better than a VPN in some ways, but it's not zero trust. So therefore, we want to make sure we're delivering traffic in a true zero trust model. So a question would be, can we trust our zero trust network access provider with our encryption keys? Or better question is, should we entrust those providers with those keys? The second question is around, providing multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. Looking around, reading some stuff with NIST, they actually recommend a barrier or a separation between your MFA and your SSO providers. And you can see the NIST publication, it's a special publication 800-63C. I've put a link down there on the bottom as well, if you want to navigate to that. Good bedtime reading, helps you fall asleep quickly, but again, lots of great information there, and making sure that the relaying parties and all the different stuff are used the right way. We saw this happen, with a very popular MFA provider, a cloud-based MFA provider, who has been battling a security breach for the last little while. And, as with all security breaches, you hear the initial report and they say, this is what's happening. And then, a little while goes on and they, well, actually there was a bit more that happened as well. And, actually there was even a few other details that we're now discovering. And so it happens. It happens. It's the world we live in today. We've got to mitigate and manage for those things, assuming breach, even of our security providers. So again, the two different ways of communicating between the RP and the SSO, front channel federation. You're separating those two things, which is basically front channel authentication, or front channel federation is where the subscriber is looking at the IDP and then it's coming back and it's going out to the where it needs to go, the SSO provider, if you will. It's usually browser based. It's usually some web redirect of some kind. And if it's the same MFA and SSO provider, if your MFA provider is compromised, they now can get SSO access theoretically. It's a risk that's within having them together. And then back channel federation, typically same provider with an integrated connection between the MFA experience where users are validated, and then also the SSO where they're inserting into the application itself. Would love to see the questions if they're coming in. Love to hear some of those and make sure we're talking about this. But again, this is a level of trust that we're extending to a provider if we're using the same tools, if you will, within the same provider. So a breach of one part, who knows if it's isolated to that single part, and we want to make sure it's not affecting our organization. And typically, a lot of companies will work on this by having a little bit of redundancy in both their IDPs and their SSO providers, having the ability to kind of fail over and fail fast between multiple parts of them. So your user experience is not degraded, but you're also not at risk. So if you have your favorite cloud-based authentication provider who does go down, they've had some service issues lately, or they have a breach, you can quickly fail over to a more secure setting and keep things moving for your organization. Because again, your users don't care. They don't care about the security problems. They just want to get their work done. And the final point I'll make here before we get into some discussion around specific things we can do. If zero trust means zero exceptions, we shouldn't leave anything out. We should also insist that our security providers cover all of our use cases. And as I've been chatting with clients and working here like at Cyolo, I'm amazed actually, because I didn't come from like the application space. I've been in the security space for some time, but I didn't come from like the application security space. Coming to Cyolo, I'm amazed at how many legacy applications. I think the previous guy called them heritage applications. I like that term actually. We might steal that. Legacy applications, those that don't speak SAML, those that don't work with SCIM or OIDC or Zero Auth, or the languages that are currently used for modern authentication techniques, cloud-based authentication. Be surprised how many there are out there. And these are a challenge in some ways because these legacy applications, typically you can't upgrade them easily or quickly because they're very critical to the business. It's like saying to the business, I have to shut down the main cash register of our company for 3 months while we rebuild this application, in a cloud model or some more modern technique. And that's a very difficult conversation. Specifically, terrifyingly, actually, how many financial services agencies rely on old IBM mainframes that are still hosting applications that are running our modern economies. So these legacy applications provide unique challenges. And typically, they're left outside the purview of most identity validation techniques, and which then creates significant risk. Talked to a lot of customers who explained how much work they have to do to, in some of their words, encase that application in cement to provide the level of security that it actually needs. So big problem. So in our opinion, zero trust should also extend to everything in your world. What about the application that uses generic user accounts or login sharing? And there's a lot of good reasons for this, why users have done this historically. And so while the reasons they do it might be good, the security risks are still very high from this behavior. So with a generic user account, that's where everyone is using the same user ID, like everybody's using sales@yourcompany.com as the user ID, and we're all using the same password, which classically is, your company 1234. So we're all using that same login to get into that application. And so now we've violated the first principle, which is we need to validate every single user and know who they are when they connect. So we're not doing that. We just see, oh, it was sales@yourcompany.com who logged in. Well, who the heck is that person behind that login? We want to be able to understand that. So we think zero trust should also be able to deliver security. We need to deliver the level of detail to that information so we can make the appropriate decisions. Because just because they have a good username and password, that doesn't mean that that person should be entitled to access that information. It could be the front desk person who just happens to get that username and application password and are now looking at your core reporting tools or your core supply chain information. And that's maybe that person should not be entitled to that information based off of their role or their security privileges. And we should also be able to, again, federate multiple identity providers. A lot of times, especially like a merger and acquisition play, where a company is either bought or buys another company, they'll have their existing identity stack and the other company will have another identity stack. And integrating those two things is a lot of times a non-starter. So what'll happen is they'll just either not extend connection to applications on both sides of the acquisition fence, or they'll have to create new users so that the same user will exist in both places, which is not a great idea. Securing the remote access specifically to ICS environments, manufacturing, oil and gas, critical infrastructure. These environments that have historically been air gapped, they're now being connected. And yes, they're firewalled off. They're trying to be kept very separate, but there's still connection points. And the reasons we do this are they provide a significant advantage to our company. And so instead of having to fly a technician to the site so they can get into the secure area and go walk up to that one device that they need to perform service on, now we can do that remotely. We all can see clearly the cost savings and operational savings of that. But it does now open an internet connection of some kind that injects a ton of risk into our ICS environments. So we need to also expect that our security vendors will support our zero trust journey into these environments as well. And then finally, the application that you built 15 years ago for that one specific use case, you hired that one company, they built it for you, and it's been working for 15 years. Again, critical to your business. It would take an incredible amount of development time, money, resources to get that application modernized. And all of those things are difficult and hard to get going. But replacing the application is really a non-starter because, again, it is functional, critically functional to your business. But these do not support modern security tools. So some questions and some use cases that we should be expecting our security vendors to help us with, because whenever I chat with customers, they always bring up something in this space. I was just at a CIO event this week. There's stuff in this space for almost every company. And so we should expect our security vendors to have zero exceptions as well as they work with us on our zero trust strategy. So questions that you can ask your security vendor or ask yourself. So these are questions you should ask you and your team as you evaluate the security policy and posture of your different vendors. The first, in your security vendor, do you trust them? Can they read write on your network? And I'm not saying that they would do this. I'm not saying that they would intentionally go about doing this. I relayed the story of our founder who would ask the security community, especially after he left the Israeli Navy and he became the CISO of a global manufacturing organization. He would ask, can you read write on my network? And, are you okay with that? Is that something you're okay with? Not saying they would do that, not saying they intentionally build their products to leave a back door. And it's not that. It's just in their architecture, could they possibly do that? And if they can, now that just leaves you with information of what steps you might need to take to mitigate some of that risk from that vendor. Do they retain your encryption keys or other key pieces of information? What information of yours that should be yours and should never be anybody else's do they need to do their job? Questions to ask them. Can they initiate a tunnel into your sensitive areas, whether it's your data center, your cloud, or whatever that is? Can they initiate a tunnel? I mean, I don't care what the tunnel is. If they can initiate a tunnel and make a connection, then there's risk there. If they can do that without your permission or monitoring. So questions asked. Do they store your credentials in their cloud at all? Do they have your login information? How secure is your login information to their service? Any questions there? And what happens to your service when they are disrupted? We've seen that a lot with other manufacturers and providers in security space. What happens if their service is degraded or is suffering issues, or if they're under attack and their stuff isn't working the way it goes? What happens to your service as a customer if that is occurring? And their support agents, can they log in unsupervised? What mechanisms are in place to monitor, audit, record, and ensure that any of their support agents or any of their team, can they log in? Can they do work? And you might be paying them. You might be in a managed service agreement with them, and you want those agents to log in and maintain your system, tune a policy, whatever you want them to do. But you want to make sure, can they do it unsupervised? So what mechanisms are in place to initiate and then control that workflow? And how do they track your data, your utilization and user data? What information are they retaining about you as a customer? In Europe, GDPR has started the onslaught of making sure the user and data and behavior is handled more appropriately. I know California has passed similar rules. And so we're seeing that trend starting, but just know, that's your data, it's your activity, it's what your users are doing, what users you have that are logging in, and just asking them, what do they do with that information? How do they track it? So this is kind of a short 7-question list to hopefully generate some thought and discussion internally that you can start asking your security vendors or yourselves. And then asking your security vendor, can you add yourself as a user? Do you decrypt my traffic? Can you create a tunnel to my data sources? Are there coverage limitations in your solution? What are you not able to secure? If it's too good to be true, it probably is. There's no miracle cybersecurity tool, as we all know. So what are the gaps? Where do they not work well? What user data do you retain of mine? And finally, I'm at this. I'll leave this slide up here. Just 5 questions to ask your security vendor as you go through some of the due diligence, and I hope to spark maybe some thoughts. Again, I know it's a provocative idea, maybe, and hopefully it helps us all to kind of think. We're all highly concerned with keeping the data and the information safe of our organizations, and so we should also take a same approach. We're working hard to deploy zero trust methodologies in environments. We're working hard to do our best to respond to the incidents and things that are happening. And sometimes it's easy to overlook an area, perhaps that we've given a lot of trust to. And now the question is, should we be giving trust to those vendors and to those people? And so your environment is going to be different. Everyone's going to have their own unique methodology for that. But I hope that this can start conversations internally for you and then with your vendors to make sure that zero trust security does extend to your security vendors as well. So with that, my presentation time is concluded. Ishmael, thank you very much for hosting us. Again, my QR code's there. The link for my LinkedIn is in the the Slack chat. look forward to continuing conversations as we go forward. And we'll pause now for questions.
Thank you so much, Samuel, for making us stop here and reflect on all of these good questions, right? Now, I have one question, several questions for you, but starting with the most important one. Should we trust your QR code?
That's why yes, it's my QR code. I made it. I know what's behind that link. And I know that you're all security professionals. So that's why I put the URL in the Slack. So you can certainly go that if you want to. Samuel J. Hill on LinkedIn. You can search me up yourself. I'm very readily visible there.
Because you asked us to reflect on all these questions, like, should we trust this now? So now I see your QR code. Like, should I trust it? So you
right.
actually
well, that's what I know. You remember the Super Bowl, right? That one company had a QR code just bouncing on the screen for the ad. And so I know all of you guys didn't click on that ad, but we all know people who did. So if that makes you nervous, look forward to seeing you at however you find me.
Some level of paranoia is definitely healthy. Now, so as we go through this, it's very, I totally agree with you. It's very important that we ask ourselves these questions, because we're saying zero trust. And I guess what we're saying is like zero trust does not exist. There is less trust, less implicit trust, but be careful with, as you do this, because you might be putting all your eggs in the same basket. Like, we're saying you need to go into, federation of identities. That may include like going with one single identity management provider. Now you're putting all your trust into that. And obviously there's no perfect solution here, right? You always have to make these decisions. But like as we talk about these, supply chain attacks, which they're not going to stop.
No.
What do you see? What are practical measures that companies are doing that you see, or that we should be doing? Like, for example, should we test every single agent that we introduce into our environment and do through product security testing and in-depth product security testing to see how much attack surface that can, bring into my environment? What are some of the suggestions you have there? What do you see other companies doing?
Yeah, I look at it like, everybody's got their own compensating controls, and your architecture is all going to be different. Like, you guys have all addressed different needs. Maybe when you started the journey, you were at this place, which was very different than another person's starting place. So one level of supply chain risk might be not as big a deal to some companies as it is to other companies. And so I hate to give it's highly dependent answer, because that's, but as we all know, it's cybersecurity, that's what it is. It's highly dependent. But yeah, typically, we have to ask hard questions in security. We always do. We have to ask them of ourselves, have to ask them of our users and of our, third parties that are coming in, but also of our vendors. And I think that's where I'm seeing a lot of companies start to take those steps of, we've got a lot of the basics taken care of. We've got XDR agents out there. We've got all the different defense in depth tools that are, pertinent, specific for us. And now it's that next step. Once we get to that place where we've got most of it there, the good technology pieces, it's a process of, let's make sure we're also inspecting them and making sure we're comfortable with the level of trust we're giving to them, or that they have earned from us.
Right. Very good points. And I would say probably that, make sure that's documented as well, as part of a risk register. Yep.
And add it to the list of, potential things that happen in your next tabletop. Like what happened, I'm going to throw CrowdStrike out there. I have no bones with CrowdStrike at all. I love them. Know a lot of folks there, but just a lot of you probably have CrowdStrike. But what would happen if CrowdStrike got breached? What risk would that bring into your organization? Include that as one of your scenarios, just as an unthinkable thing that could possibly happen. Because we all know the unthinkable will and probably does happen.
Zero trust. There you go. Yep. All right. Thank you, Samuel. I don't have any other questions for you right now. Let me just, I'm checking Slack, but very good comments, again, great presentation and energy. Thank you for the webcasts. Learned a great deal of helpful information and had a very good time learning.